Hello, everyone. I'm Dion Cook from AVIXA, and welcome to WyreStorm's AV over IP SDVoE Solutions and Industry Insights, presented by Andrew Herron and Justin Kennington. This webinar is brought to you by our sponsor today, WyreStorm. Before I hand the presentation over to Andrew and Justin, I just need to go over a very brief housekeeping item or two. For everyone viewing today's webinar live, it counts for 1/2 CTS renewal unit and none for the CTSD nor the I. Please allow up to 7 business days to view those on your transcripts. If you have any issues, please email my team directly at webinars@avixa.org. The webinar will last approximately 45 to 60 minutes and all attendees have been placed on mute. If you have any questions during the presentation, please enter them into the Q&A window only so today's moderators can address them at the end of the webinar. To access the Q&A window, move your cursor towards the bottom of the live stream video box, locate the Q&A icon, and type away. Just please be mindful that there is a separate a separate menu for the chat. You'll have access to this recorded webinar on our website, avixa.org/webinars within about 5 to 7 business days. Now to Justin and Andrew, please take it away.
All right, thanks, Dion. Hi, everybody. Thanks for attending today's webinar. I'm Andy Herron, Product Director at WyreStorm, and joined by Justin Kennington, President of SDVoE. So we have some really great information to share with you today pertaining to the SDVoE Alliance and associated technologies and how WyreStorm is leveraging this technology to create some amazing AV over IP solutions. We don't have a ton of time today, like Dion said, we have about 45 minutes or so. So we're going to kind of get right into things and kick things off with Justin. He's going to talk about specifics related to SDVoE and its advantages. And then I'll follow up after Justin to talk about WyreStorm's specific solutions. So Justin, kick us off.
Thanks, Andy. And thanks everybody for joining us today. As Andy said, my job here is to give you not only an introduction to the SDVoE Alliance, I hope many of you are familiar with us already, but also to give you a little understanding of the state of play in AV over IP today and why the SDVoE Alliance is so important to Pro AV. It starts off with the state of AV over IP today. It's what everyone's talking about more and more. It's what's being installed in systems. And yet in a lot of places, the matrix switch and point-to-point connectivity still actually dominates the sales figures. And we think that the reasons for that are twofold. One, that most AV over IP products rely on too much compression to squeeze the signal down into legacy networks. And that adds image artifacts, it adds latency. And these are things that our users who've been on the matrix switch for so many years are not accustomed to and don't want to see. And then second of all, too many manufacturers are building their AV over IP products inside their own walled gardens, right? And that makes less and less sense than it ever did in a world where Ethernet is our transport, where the IT buyer is our customer. Interoperability is something woven into the fabric of what IT does, and AV trying to do something different is not a way to help ourselves. So 6 years ago now, we founded the Software-Defined Video over Ethernet Alliance, and our purpose is to standardize Ethernet as the way that Pro AV transports all AV signals, and further to create a platform that allows software to define AV applications. We'll talk more in a bit about what that means. So what is SDVoE? Well, I told you it stands for Software-Defined Video over Ethernet. SDVoE is an ecosystem of over 700 products from 50 manufacturers that all work together. SDVoE offers performance that matches the matrix switch. That means no latency. That means perfect image quality. SDVoE is based on standards like Ethernet, like TCP/IP, and off-the-shelf infrastructure. And SDVoE offers a comprehensive software API that lets you control the AV experience without redesigning the system. So let's break down what these 4 components really mean. I told you we're more than 50 members. Today it's 52 working together on a platform Of course, I'm thankful to our steering members who helped drive the alliance and create it, but especially today, I'm thankful for WyreStorm, one of our contributing members, who has a lot of great products on this platform. Many of the 700 products that are built on SDVoE come from WyreStorm. That ecosystem is driven by interoperability. This is not just a bunch of encoder and decoder boxes. These things come in all different sizes, shapes, form factors, and it's because of the interoperability. That means that no one manufacturer in our alliance has to build it all, right? So Christie builds video projectors. They build LED screens with SDVoE built in, and those work just perfectly with WyreStorm encoders, for example. Nobody has to build every piece of the solution. And that's really powerful about an ecosystem. And we're seeing great traction as a result. I hope many of you are familiar with RH Consulting's report, and silly me, I should have put a QR code on this page for you to download a link. But I encourage you all, visit rhconsulting.uk, and you'll find there it's called the Network Audio Report, Audio Network Products Report. And it's such a simple concept. For 10 years now, every year, this company has been counting up all of the networked audio products. There's so many Dantes, there's so many Ravennas, there's so many LiveWires, and so on and so on, just to track over time, what's the growth of each ecosystem, who's winning, who's losing. And this year, they just published their 10th annual report and finally decided to include video products in that report. And I'm very happy to say that SDVoE carried the day with the most products, with the most manufacturers adopting our platform of any that were counted in the report. So we have a lot of great traction for this standards-based interoperable approach. Another important piece of information that's really just coming to market, and Andy's going to be sharing with you some of the fruits of this labor. SDVoE is the only AV over IP system that has an ASIC at its core. I encourage you all to check out the SDVoE Academy. We're posting a new course to explain what the heck is an ASIC, how's it different than an FPGA. There will be a link a little later in the presentation so you can see the SDVoE Academy. But an ASIC is a kind of chip it's called an application-specific integrated circuit. It's a chip that's designed to do a specific job and only that specific job. An FPGA is a very flexible piece of hardware that can be programmed to perform almost any job, but that comes at a very high cost. The chip itself is expensive. It comes with a lot of extra power consumption. You see here an ASIC can save up to 85% of the power consumption. That means, you know, a device that used to be a 20-watt device could now be a 4-watt device, for example. And that really speaks to a couple of things. For designers, it means less heat load in your rack, less heat load in your wall plate, and a much easier thermal system to design. But it also ultimately benefits any of your sustainability goals, right? The less power that your AV system needs to consume, that makes it easier for your buildings to get LEED certification. It makes it easier for you to use power in other more useful ways than just moving AV around, right? We can move the AV with much less power than any other system out there, thanks to this ASIC technology. And by the way, no single manufacturer would ever be able to do this because the investment required to build one of these ASICs it's a $15 or $20 million cash investment up front just to get to the first chip. And no single manufacturer has the resources or the business case, frankly, to make that investment. Whereas SDVoE, as an alliance driven by so many companies, can come together and do that. The performance of SDVoE is based on the performance of a matrix switch, right? Since TD was invented, the matrix switch is how we connect sources to destinations. And the matrix switch does a great job. You get the best image quality possible by just moving the signal from one place to another. But doing it over Ethernet carries a lot of advantages, right? It's a much more flexible system. It can be much more cost effective. And yet, when we use too much compression, of course, there's a trade-off. Do you want the quality of a matrix switch, or do you want the flexibility of Ethernet? It's hard to have both. Well, SDVoE's position in the marketplace is as the technology that gives you both. It gives you the performance of a matrix and the flexibility of AV over IP. That's why we say SDVoE delivers matrix switching without the matrix switch. So let's talk about the platform capabilities, because this is not only a platform for switching and extension. Of course, at its core, that's what we do. We move video signals with audio from place to place. But beyond that, there's a processing engine inside every SDVoE device that can create features like video walls, that can create windowing, so we can take multiple sources, up to 32 sources actually, and squeeze them onto a single display. And that's without any extra hardware, without an expensive windowing processor. We can also do KVM. Many SDVoE products include USB connectivity for adding in keyboards and mice, or even a complete array of USB 2.0 devices. Again, I know Andy has some slides on some specific products, and he's going to lay out the different ways that SDVoE can handle USB for you. SDVoE is IT friendly, and that's because we pay attention to IT standards. We did not invent everything in our stack, right? That would be silly. That's what HDBaseT did. They invented everything down to a physical layer. And there were good reasons for that. HDBaseT solved a lot of important problems that the industry had 15 years ago. But we've sort of moved beyond that now, and we need to be on the network. So we've leveraged the first 4 layers of this OSI model without inventing anything, right? TCP, Ethernet, IP. These were built by people smarter than us. We're going to take advantage of it. It's at the higher levels where SDVoE becomes a video management solution. And so we've created the technologies at those layers, including our clock resynchronization, including our session management, and including a powerful API that lets this all be controlled. And this is all done in a way that the IT department can understand, that the IT department is willing to own and manage. And that is critical for any AV over IP solution. So let's talk about that API and about that software a little bit, right? The API, that's Application Programming Interface, is the interface between a user-facing control software, and I want to put a pin in that term, and the SDVoE devices themselves, the encoders and decoders, right? So that control software could be, the program running on a touch panel. It could be the buttons on a handheld remote, a web interface, could be a voice control. Whatever interface it is that you're ultimately presenting to the end user, the API is there to translate between that and the SDVoE endpoints that live down below. That API is common no matter which manufacturer in the SDVoE ecosystem has produced the product. That means that the software manufacturer or the engineer who creates the interface can count on any SDVoE device responding to the commands in the very same way. That is what ultimately drives our interoperability. We've had a question in from Johnny Milo. Hi, Johnny, asking about a comparison to HDBaseT, and I think this is ultimately it. HDBaseT is about moving a high quality digital signal from one end of a category cable to the other, not moving it over an Ethernet network, right? So ultimately that's the main difference. But also when it comes to interoperability, we've defined everything about an SDVoE product all the way up to that control software layer. And I'm sure any of you who've experimented with HDBaseT interoperability find that there are a lot of caveats, right? Well, this works, but that doesn't work, and this doesn't work between these products, but it works between those products. It can be a real challenge because HDBaseT only defined those sort of low layers. How do you move a signal from one place to another? They didn't define how does a device need to behave, and that's what SDVoE does. There's a really exciting new program from us this year, which we call our SDVoE developer certification. So any of you who are watching who are software developers, AV programmers, software engineers, and are interested in learning to work with this API, we offer a completely free training program for you to be able to do that. There's a QR code link on your screen that will take you to the SDVoE Academy. And there you can find some totally free video content that will educate you on our API, how to use it. And then at the end, you take a certification exam. And once you become certified, you will get access to all the binaries, all the detailed documentation, everything that there is to know about the SDVoE API. And at that point, you can go start creating applications. Whether that means, you've got a job coming up and you've got some SDVoE in a conference room and you just want to make it work on your touch panel, you can do that as a one-off. Or if you want to take this training and go create new commercial software that you want to sell to other integrators to control SDVoE systems, you're allowed to do that too. You'll want to call me about membership so that you can call it an SDVoE software, but you're allowed to do that. We really want to see SDVoE as the Android of Pro AV, right? A big ecosystem of multiple hardware manufacturers who are all creating hardware that runs a standard OS, if you will. Our API, think of as the OS. And then above that is software created by people who are not the hardware manufacturers, right? Uber doesn't make phones. They make software that runs on your phones, and it's really interesting. That's the ecosystem that we're working to create here. We've issued almost 100 developer certifications to date, and we see that number growing quickly. So I invite you all to check that out and check out the SDVoE Academy in general. Speaking of the SDVoE Academy, we also offer, for those of you who are not programmers, we call it the Design Partner Certification. This is a training program that also qualifies for CTS credits, by the way, that teaches you, the structure is, let's say that you know how to design a video system with a matrix switch at the core. We're going to teach you everything you need to know to design an SDVoE system instead, right? What are the things SDVoE can do that the matrix switch system could not do? And what are the new kinds of limitations and considerations that you need to be aware of as a designer? Design Partner Certification will teach you all of that, and it's also totally free. We have over 2,000 people have been certified through that program. And the very last thing that I want to highlight for you to be involved with SDVoE is something that I think is very entertaining, and I hope you're all enjoying, called SDVoE Live. This is a TV show. This is a talk show for Pro AV. I'm the host, and every 2 weeks I interview a new guest from somewhere in the Pro AV ecosystem. We rarely talk about SDVoE. We talk about whatever topics are of interest to the industry. Next week, we're going to be talking about how to build a recurring revenue model for your integration business. The week after that, we're going to be talking about the world of large format direct view LED displays. And I encourage you all, go to sdvoe.org/live and check out the show. You'll find us on YouTube. You'll find us live on our own platform. So get involved with SDVoE. Those are all the remarks I had for you today. So I want to say thank you. There's another QR code linked to our website. You can reach out to me directly at that email address if you have any questions. And with that, I will step back and hand it over to Andy, who's going to tell you how WyreStorm is leveraging this platform.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Justin. That was great stuff. So let's kick over to my screen. Okay, so let's get started. Oops, there we go. All right, so I wanted to start by just giving a little bit of background into WyreStorm and our Network HD solution for those of you that might not be completely familiar with it. So WyreStorm has been in the AV over IP game for about 8 years now. We released our first AV over IP solution back in around 2014. And that really kind of set us on the path that we're on today. Since then, we've seen a tremendous growth in Network HD, and it's by far our best-selling product line. And this growth has also turned into us offering 3 different series of AV over IP technology, which we coin as the power of 3. So the power of 3 simply means that we have 3 different series of products, the 100, 400, and 600 series. And each leverage a different type of technology, H.265, JPEG 2000, and SDVoE respectively here. You can see in these images. And we've done this because we understand that different technologies are better suited for certain applications. For example, having an H.265 solution is not going to be a great solution for a 4K low latency application. But today we're going to be focusing on our Network HD 600 series, which is utilizing the topic of conversation, which is SDVoE. And before we get into some product specifics, I also wanted to mention, that we've taken huge strides as a company to ensure that as much of our entire product catalog as possible is single-use plastic-free. So this applies for every Network HD SKU, including the 600 series, which we'll talk about. And you can see from some of these images, the eco-friendly packaging that we're using, such as cardboard inserts instead of foam, along with paper coverings over the product, and using paper bags for any of the accessories that go in the box instead of plastic. And this says these numbers are continually growing, but this going green SUP-free effort has turned into saving multiple tons of single-use plastics from being produced and ending up in landfills when people throw away stuff. And hundreds of thousands of gallons of water from being used in plastic production. So that's something that we're really proud of, not just with Network HD, but our entire product catalog as well. So let's get into the topic of conversation. And I wanted to start by just introducing our first generation Network HD 600s, which was our first technology, our first solution that offered SDVoE technology at its core. And this was the 600 TX and 600 RX. This pair was released in about 2017, and it was our first introduction to offering a premium AV over IP solution from WyreStorm to the market. This allowed us to bring the same, and in some instances better performance compared to the traditional HD base D switch. It brought compatibility for things like HDMI 2.0, so 4K 60 over a network, and zero latency distribution. And up until this point, we had only had a 4K 30 solution, which was our Network HD 400 series. This first generation, and Justin touched on this a little bit in his slides, this was an FPGA architecture. So there was a couple limitations that came along with using an FPGA, such as it was more power hungry, and that in turn produced more heat, hence the heat sink chassis that you see here in this picture. And then, because it was so power hungry, we couldn't integrate things like PoE support. But if we fast forward to 2022 to now, we just recently retired this first generation platform, and we've now developed 4 brand new SKUs that are using an ASIC architecture that Justin had mentioned. So let's talk about some of these new SKUs that we have. The first of which is the 600 TRX. So this model and all subsequent models, like I said, are going to be using an ASIC architecture. And right off the bat, we're going to have a ton of improvements by doing this. First of which, our bill of materials is going to be lower, which then allows us to offer it at a lower price point to our customers. And then obviously there's other things that come along with being an ASIC as well. So lower power consumption, which allows us to reduce the size of the chassis, and that also reduces the amount of heat. So these units are much smaller, more compact, and easy to install in a rack or behind a display. And due to it requiring much less power, we're also able to add in PoE plus support. So now this unit can power from a compatible PoE switch without needing to have ugly DC power supplies hooked up to everything. The video spec is still a full HDMI 2.0 encoding solution. So it will support 4K 60, 444, 8-bit, and it will do the high dynamic range formats such as Dolby Vision, HDR10, HLG. And we also will retain the ability to do things like zero latency genlock transmission, so zero end-to-end latency over a 10 gig network, or the ability to have an instantaneous matrix switching speed. So switching from between multiple sources is an instantaneous switch with no black screens or freeze frames. And one of the biggest benefits with this model in particular is that it's actually a transceiver. So hence the TRX model number not being a standalone TX or a standalone RX. And so that allows this unit to act as a transmitter or a receiver, which can be programmed in our software. But more uniquely, it actually allows us to allow this to be a proper full transceiver. So you can encode and decode over the network simultaneously, and it's not just one or the other. We've added in some other great features, such as USB. So now this has got a couple USB ports on it for keyboard mouse applications and extension over a network. And then as you'll find with all of our Network HD series, whether it's this transceiver or any of the other models that I'll be talking about, is they all support video wall processing, so we can do up to 8x8 video wall, so 64 panels, with the ability to do some bezel correction. And then we also have the ability, like Justin mentioned, to do multi-view processing. So, up to a 32 windows with, full control over the size and the placement of any of those windows in a multi-view picture-in-picture layout. So that's the first of 4 SKUs. That's the TRX. If we move on, the next model in line is very similar to the TRX, but it's called the TRX-F. And if you haven't figured it out already, the F is going to stand for fiber. So this is something that I'm really personally excited about, because up until this point, Network HD has been focused on copper and RJ45 networks. And we've never had a fiber solution within the Network HD family before. So that's one of the biggest differences. So we can now extend over a network up to 300 meters, or about 1,000 feet, using OM3 fiber. In addition to having fiber transport, we've also added in a high-speed USB 2.0 chipset that supports the full USB 2.0 spec of 480 megs. And this is something that the 600 series will actually have over HD-based-T in some situations, is that many times USB over HD-based-T does have a limitation where it can't reach the full USB spec, and sometimes it's even cut in half. So this is a great benefit if you needed full USB extension over a network. And, being full 2.0, the compatibility is pretty much endless, whether it's webcams, touch screens, or you're just doing maybe just USB transfers over a network. So that's the first 2 models. They're both transceivers. And then now I'll talk about the last 2 products, which are the more traditional separate encoder and decoder. All right, so surely but not least are the 610 TX and RX. So our goal with the 600 series is the same we have with pretty much all of our Network HD family, is that we want to provide as many pieces to the puzzle as possible. This is one of the big reasons why we designed the 610s, in addition to the other 2 SKUs that you saw. Is that every SKU within the 600 family is interoperable with each other. So you can pick and choose different models based on application requirements. So, for example, you can use the transceiver for a majority of an installation that doesn't need any specific added requirements. And then perhaps maybe you had a couple long haul distances that you needed to do with some remote displays, and you can add in a couple of the TRX-F models, the fiber models. And then perhaps you had some other requirements, maybe, for example, Dante, and this is where the 610s come into play. And the whole point is, we don't want to create one SKU that you have to pay a premium for, that, you might not need all those features on a majority of your system. So you can pick and choose different SKUs, and they all will work together. So the 610s bring a couple additions. Like I briefly mentioned, so the 610 is going to offer a 2-channel Dante slash AES67 output. So now any audio that is ingested into the 610TX can be sent over a network to compatible Dante AES67 mixers or DSP amplifiers and so on. We also have the ability to choose where this audio comes from, which is pretty unique. So it can either be from the HDMI input, which would be the obvious choice, or we have an analog multi-purposed audio input output. You can see on the right side there, that 5-pin green Phoenix connector. And this connection can be configured to be either an audio input or an output based on what you're looking to do. And you can actually choose whether you want the Dante transmitter to take audio from the HDMI input or from the separate analog input. And in addition to that, we've also added the ability to isolate Dante to a separate LAN connection. So there are 2 modes. So the first is to output Dante via the main 10 gig network. So the main connection that will also be sending the SDVoE feed out. And this is good, if you have Dante equipment on the same network, perhaps, as Network HD components, everything's on a flat VLAN and you have one switch. However, not every application is going to be set up like this. And sometimes Dante equipment will exist on a completely separate network. And in this instance, we can use the secondary LAN connection to isolate Dante to only that port. And then you can distribute that audio to a dedicated auxiliary network, and you don't have to worry about the complicated configurations that may come, with integrating Dante into a one flat network. And in addition to Dante, the 610TX and RX are also going to be using that same high-speed USB chipset that was found in the fiber model. So again, you can connect many different types of USB peripherals and extend them over the network. All right, so that was the 4 new 600 series SKUs that we have that are using the ASIC architecture. I do have just a couple more slides. I really kind of wanted to give a little bit of inspiration as far as product applications go, and give you guys a little bit of where we see a lot of use cases for our particular network HD products. So there's going to be 3 that I'll go over. And actually, there's a couple questions here. See if there's.
I'm keeping the questions nailed down for you, Andy, while I'm typing them in. So
nice. Okay, cool. Thanks.
And I encourage everyone to look at the question and answer section. There have been some good questions come in, and I've typed the answers there while Andy's presenting.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So, like I said, let's close out with some applications here. So, first of which, residential. It's pretty straightforward. I'm sure that most of you understand how a residential distribution can work. But a couple of the key points why 600s would be beneficial is obviously you're going to get picture perfect video distribution. Like I said, these are HDMI 2.0 solutions. So, everything up to Dolby Vision, 4K 60, HDR is going to be supported. You're also going to get Dolby Atmos and DTS pass through as well. So if you're doing in a residential application, you're doing big home theaters or anything like that, the 600s can distribute that untouched, and you can go to an AVR for a nice home theater setup. CEC, we have the native ability to power on displays on and off natively through HDMI, so you don't have to worry about running ugly IR emitters, or worrying about your RS-232 pinouts and baud rates and things like that. We have the native ability to control power on and off for displays right through an HDMI cable. So that makes things convenient and easy if you're in a residential application, because most, if not at all, all displays at this point are going to support CEC in some capacity. And there's definitely some advantages to using 600s over HD-based T. Things like multi-view. You're not going to typically get native multi-view processing within an HD-based T switcher. And the modularity of it being AV over IP, with a traditional HD-based T switch, you're usually limited to 4 input, 4 output, or 8 input, 8 output, and there's no easy way to expand that if a couple extra screens or a couple extra sources are needed. With network HD and AV over IP, you're only limited to the amount of Ethernet ports you have on your switch. So it's very easy to add in extra devices at any time. Operating centers, this is something that we see a lot in the commercial aspect. There's a lot of very specific requirements that are shared across a lot of operating centers. Things like video walls or multi-view requirements. You can see from this graphic off to the right, that's a little isometric image of an operating center. So typically you'd see video wall, large format video walls or picture-in-picture application requirements in something like an operating center. You have multiple computers, multiple sources being fed at the same time and all being monitored. So for the 600's ability to natively be able to support video walls and multi-view via one device is a great USP. Zero sacrifice in video quality. Again, you're going to see a little bit of overlap between these applications, but that's what makes the 600s great. In an application such as an operating center, you don't want it to take 3 or 4 seconds to switch between different video feeds. You need to have instantaneous switching, and you don't want to have compression. In most instances, this content needs to be high quality, and having compression and artifacts and things like that on your video signal isn't going to be great. And also in operating centers, the content might be sensitive, depending on what they're monitoring. All of the streams coming over a network HD 600 system are going to be AES encrypted. So you don't have to worry about that content just being openly transmitted over a network for anybody to potentially grab. All of it's encrypted from end to end. And then lastly, esports. This is something that this is kind of an exciting upcoming market. And there's a lot of use case for 600s and SDVoE in general within this market. Zero latency Genlock distribution, you can imagine, anytime you're using, human interaction with a device, a computer mouse or a game controller or anything like that, you're not going to want latency. So with the 600's ability to distribute over a network with no latency, and then now that we've added USB onto the new 600 products, it's a great pair for esports applications with game controllers connecting to a remote computer or keyboard and mouse extension and things like that. And again, like I mentioned, with residential, easy scalability. With esports, if you have more computers that are added, you have to add a big video wall, or do picture-in-picture with multiple game feeds coming in at the same time. The 600 series can do all of that. So real flexibility with the 600s. And that about wraps it up for my side of the presentation. I have a closing slide here that just has a couple QR codes. You can open up your phones and scan these QR codes. And I think we'll probably also drop these in the chat as well. But just some extra resources. You can view the 600, all the products that I've talked about today. You can scan that first QR code and be brought to our 600 landing page on the website, get more details on the products. If you were interested in any of our other Network HD product line, whether it's the 100 series or the 400 series or anything else that we offer, you can scan that second QR code. And then we do have a Network HD certification course, and it's a really well put together course that goes over everything from point A to point Z of getting a Network HD system set up, all the ins and outs, and that is an AVIXA accredited course as well, so you can put that towards your CTS credits. But yeah, that's about it, guys. Was there any other questions that needed to be
one that came up
answered here? Let's see.
Was what is the where to go? What is the estimated shipping time for NHD 600 series products?
Shipping time, it's the big question in today's market, isn't it? We have stock of just about everything. We did a real good job of forecasting and making sure that we were able to procure chips and everything like that. So there shouldn't be any major lead times when it comes to placing an order. It's not like you have to wait 2-3 months or anything like that. So you should be able to place an order and get things relatively quickly.
Next question was, any plans to add licensing for Atmos or DTS-X downmixing on the 600 series?
Yeah, that's a good question. We've talked about that internally a little bit here and there. And, a lot of the applications that we see don't necessarily require Dolby downmixing and DTS downmixing. I mean, in the residential space, I would see it being a little bit more of a requirement than in commercial. But at this point, we don't have anything set in stone or on the roadmap for downmixing audio. It will downmix like an LPCM signal, but it does not have a license to do any of the Dolbys.
Next that I see here, they're rolling in fast now. What's the bandwidth requirement for the 600 series? You want to take that, Andy?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if you want to add to it too, you can. But it depends. So on a base level, these are 10 gig components versus traditional 1 gig network. So it does require to run over a 10 gigabit network, but the bandwidth is dependent on the video input that's going into an encoder. So if you're sending a 1080p signal, the bandwidth is going to be lower than sending a 4K 60. And all that stuff is documented in our spec sheets. You can get, accurate numbers of, exactly how much bandwidth is used depending on the video timing that's going into an encoder. Let's see here.
Here's what I can take. Is anyone offering SDVoE control software for free? Well, Andy, you can tell us how WyreStorm software is available. I don't know the answer.
Yeah, well, we have a free Network HD Touch app, is what it's called. It's called Network HD Touch. And that's a free app that you can download for Android and iPads that will interface with our controller. So you can do matrix switching, video wall manipulation, picture-to-picture stuff, all for free. There is no charge to that app, and it's a really intuitive drag and drop touchscreen control interface. But like Justin kind of touched on too, the SDVoE API is a completely open thing. So there's tons of flexibility with being able to create custom content or custom control interfaces rather. We also do have on our website drivers for all the major control system brands as well. So if you are, you do use a particular brand of control system, we most likely have a driver that you can use as well.
I'll also point out here that one of our members, Semtech, who actually builds the chipsets that go into these, has a piece of software that I believe is available to anyone to look at it, to take a look at the interface and options available, kind of just as said here. I'll provide a link in the Q&A where I believe that you can go get that, or at least learn more about it. So there it is in the Q&A link text. How does WyreStorm's NHD compare to others on the market? I mean, better, I assume, right? That's why we're here.
It's the best solution on the market.
And now that I said that, I'm going to pray that no other my other members logged in here and are listening.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Looks like maybe our questions have slowed. I'll say on that last one, I mean, I'm not going to compare WyreStorm to any other members, right? That's like asking me which one of my children is my favorite. I'm not allowed to do that. But do take a look at the answer to the very first question about comparing SDVoE to HD-based-T. And I did put some interesting comments and even some links to a comparison video in there that you guys can check out. Meanwhile, I'll say that all SDVoE members build wonderful products, each unique in their own special way.
Okay, Justin and Andy, thank you so much. And I'd like to thank all of our attendees for joining us on today's webinar, WyreStorm's AV over IP, SDVoE Solutions and Industry Insights. This recording will be available on the AVIXA website, avixa.org/webinars within about 5 to 7 business days. And your half of CTS renewal unit will be applied to your transcripts within those 7 days. If you have any trouble with this, please contact my team directly at webinars@avixa.org. And just a side note for CTS holders, if you've registered for this webinar with an email address other than the one that's on file for you, we can't give you credit for attending. We have to fix it on the back end. So please email your account rep and let them know that you used the wrong email address, and then we'll get it fixed for you there. So thank you to our sponsor today, WyreStorm, and a huge thank you to our presenters for helping us to understand their AV solutions and industry insights. We hope you've enjoyed this. Please stay safe and make it a great day, everyone.